So whenever like we have a database, there is two aspects to this, right? One is the data engineering side on how you are setting up your database, how you are managing your data within this, how you are granting the access. And the other section is about the data analysis, how you are writing your queries to extract the data and then do further analysis on top of that, right? So during this five-day session, our emphasis will be more towards the data analysis approach, right? And towards the end, like the last session, we'll also discuss on a bit of some of the advanced concepts, like how our data warehouse works, right? Or what is the data lake and data warehouse. So I mean, we'll touch upon a little more advanced concepts there, right? So let me share my screen now and start with this. So let me quickly share my screen. So post the session, right, all the recordings will be shared and you will be informed where you can get the access to the recordings and everything. Cool. So in this session, we will be starting, we'll be using the Microsoft SQL Server, and to follow along the sessions, right, I will request you to download the Microsoft SQL Server so that you can follow along the system, right, follow along the course in the next sessions. So to download the Microsoft SQL Server, what you need to do, just come here and say download Microsoft SSMS, right? So you need to write SQL Server Management Studio. That will be the most apt thing. So just search for download SQL Server Management Studio, open this up. And when you open this up, right, you will be getting this option, free download for SQL Server Management Studio 18.10. I'm using a little older version, but that doesn't matter, right? The functioning of this SSMS will exactly be the same. So download this up, and once you download, right, you will be getting to this particular window. And onto the first, when you will start your SQL Server, after you install and do everything, you will come to this particular screen where it will ask you to connect to a particular server type, right? So when you connect to that screen, there is some option available. So you need to select database engine in the first screen, and then in the server name, you can type in as localhost. Now, all the people who are watching this video, right, or you're going through this course, you will not be able to do this properly. Maybe you might get some error. Some people might be able to do it properly. Some people might have to face some issue while that, right? So I will be sharing a particular video wherein whatever the steps has been mentioned over there, just follow that step and your issue will be resolved within that. It's a quick 2 minutes short video, which you can follow to like resolve that issue. So I will just connect this, right? So this is the interface that we have for Microsoft SQL Server. And before we start off writing the query, I will just give a brief about why I'm using this Microsoft SQL Server. Generally, right, like there are two types of database that we have. One is enterprise versions, which is like Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server. We have something, then we have IBM DB2, and then there are like something which is open source, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and everything like that, right? So there are two types of things. Generally, the bigger organization, they tend to go for the secured ones, and the startup companies and all those companies, right, like smaller company, they tend to go for open source, like MySQL and PostgreSQL. Now, in today's time, even Facebook uses MySQL. But in a general term, right, it's not just companies are using one database. They try to have multiple database so that if something goes wrong with one of them, they always have a dependency on the second one, right? So there is nothing wrong with any other thing that you have known. Like, let's say if you have learned MySQL in the past, and if you're learning MySQL, there is nothing wrong with this, because the syntax and everything will be exactly same. The way you are writing the query will be exactly the same. So with that, in the SQL Server, right, once you install this system, it will start with the connection of your database, right, to your connection to your server. So I have connected to my local engine, local host. You need to mention the same thing, local host, while connecting to this. In your organization, it will not be your local host. There will be some web link, some server link that will be provided to you, and you need to click on that. And there are two types of authentication. So you see here, there is something called Windows authentication, and then there is something called SQL Server authentication. So generally what happens, right? If it is Windows authentication, so whatever is your Windows user ID and password, it will be taken. If it is SQL Server authentication, then there will be a separate login and password that would have been created for you or for the users of the database. So you can use that user ID to connect to that. For your local usage, for your practice, you just need to type in localhost and use the Windows authentication and then click on connect. Once we are into the database, right, then we have to follow a hierarchy. Now, what is this hierarchy that we will be using? So let me open up a quick notepad. So within this, the first thing that we have to use is like a database, right? So what is a database? Basically, it's a collection of records, right? So consider in your organization, right? If you're working somewhere, you have different departments within that, right? Maybe let's say there is employees. Just take as an employees. Employees is one department. So when I say department, we can take that, think in terms of data, right? So employees is one section of data. Then there will be customers, which is one segment of data, right? Then there will be maybe vendors. These are one sections of data, right? So all these are different sections of data that we have. Now in the employees, there can be further details that we are keeping, right? So we can keep the personal details of an employee. We can keep the employment details of an employee, right? Then maybe we can keep, right, his project details, that where he is working and everything, and so on for all the other things, right? For all the different sections that you have, there can be multiple information that can be stored, right? So first is this section will become your database. What you're trying to do, you are creating a database for employees. And within that, what we are doing, we are storing tables. So there will be a table called personal details. We will store all the details within that. We'll store employment details, we'll store project details, and so on. That is the hierarchy that we have to follow. So let's start off first with creating a database. Now, ideally, I won't be using this particular data. I will show you what data I will be using, and I will share that across with you guys so that you can follow along in the next sessions. So to create a new database, right, what I will do, I will just come to this home screen, right? And at the top, there is an option called new query. So let me write that new query. Okay, so this new query has opened up, right? Now, to create anything within the SQL environment, right, you have to just use the keyword create and then what you are trying to create. So if we are creating a database, we will give the name database. If we are creating a table, we will give the name table out there. So I'll say create database, and then we'll give the name out here. What is the name? So let's say I will say test data, something like that. I'll just create a database named as test data. So this is it. You just go ahead and create this. This is the query. No need to put any semicolon or anything. Now, if you read any article, it will ask you to put a semicolon at the end of this, right? And that's the basic syntax, how a SQL query always ends in SQL Server. But as we are inside the SQL Server environment, we don't need to put any kind of ending over there. You can just leave it blank over there. So create database, it is already created. Now, each thing that you are creating within this environment, right, will act as an object. What I mean by that is you already have created an object database. Within that, you have created, the test data as an object you have created. So if I go ahead and execute it again, right, it will give you an error saying that it is already existing. Now, this will not happen only with database. If you are trying to create a table, that also will give you an error that, okay, this table is already existing. So why are you trying to recreate that? Right? So you have created your database, and where you can find this, right? So once you create your database, you just come here and refresh this. Click on this refresh, and in the left-hand side, you will see these options called database. So click on that, and here you will see a lot of database that is coming up. So these are the database that I have created, and amongst them, this is the one that I have created right now, test data, right? Now, if I open this database over here, I get multiple options within this database. Database diagram, tables, views, synonyms, programmability, storage, security. Now, all of those things are used at some point or the other when you are working with the database, but not at a base level, not when you are writing the queries. So this is, we have created a database. Now let's say if I have to delete the same thing, you have created a database for some, let's say, testing purpose and everything. If you want to delete this database, how you can do? You can write that same thing, drop database. So this create database and drop database is very common, right? So I will say drop database, and then I can give the name of the database that I want to delete from there. So this becomes my drop database. I'll just go ahead and execute this. So this is executed, and you can keep doing this. It doesn't like hamper anything. You can just go ahead and again execute this, which creates, execute this, delete. Now, if you observe, right, I'm selecting each one of them. I'm highlighting the query and then executing this. Now, this is the way you have to execute any SQL query in any system. The reason is, right, let's say if you are trying to execute, if you're not selecting anything and just trying to execute entire thing, it will run the entire code. So it will keep on creating and deleting, which eventually will end up in throwing the errors, right? So make sure you are highlighting one particular query and then executing this. Okay, so let me check which we have done. We have created or deleted. Okay, so we have created the test data. Now, whenever you're writing a query, there is a joke that goes around, right? Like whenever you write a code, only you knows or the God knows, right? So it's always advisable to give some comment. Now, if you have attended the Python session, I mentioned that you can use the hash symbol to create this, right? In SQL, or specifically in Microsoft SQL Server, when you're writing the SQL queries, you can use double hyphen sign to give the query over there, to give the comments out there. So I will just say creating a database. Here I will say deleting. Deleting basically is known as dropping a database. Okay, so now we have the database created, which is the test data. So what next within this, right? We also need to have some data, right? We cannot have the blank data. So now what we need to do, we need to create a table within this. So I will just rename this creating a table. Now, as I have mentioned, to create a table, it is very simple. You just have to use the create and then what you're trying to create. Again, let's say within the table, let me give some name. Maybe I will just say names, right? We want to create a table as names. So within this, I want to just store the information. Names, okay, names is fine. And then what I need to do, okay, before I even do that, so if I just go ahead and execute, so when we were creating a database, right, what we did, we said create database and then test data. That's it. When we are trying to create a table, if I go ahead and execute this, it will give me an error, incorrect syntax near names. The reason is when you are creating a table, it cannot be a blank, right? So minimum there should be one column within the data. It cannot be blank, right? So what we need to do, we need to create that columns within this. So to create a column before that, we need to give a parenthesis, right? So we have given a parenthesis, and within this, we need to give the name of the columns that we are creating. So we are creating the names over here, right? So what can be the columns that we have? We can give first name, right? First name, I will just say F name in short form, F name. And then after that, you also need to specify what is the data type you need to store in this column. Now in Excel, right? If you are having an Excel, if you're using an Excel, in Excel, you can store two type of data in the same column. So if you see, both are giving you one, right? But this is text and this is number. We are trying to store the same data within the same column. But in SQL, you cannot do that. Or in a database, you cannot do that, right? So all the data should be of the similar thing, similar like type. So what I can say F name, and then I can say text, right? Why text? Because all the names that we will be writing will be having text. And then I will say L name. Again, L name will be text. Now, if you want to also store address, I will say address. And instead of like writing the complete address, I'm just giving address. And for this, the data type, I will say varchar. And here I will say 30 within this. and I will just close this parenthesis out here. So we have given the name of the table, create table, names, and within that we have added 3 columns, F name, text, L name, text, and then address with the data type of variable character 30. We'll go ahead and execute this. So we have created this, but now let's check if it is coming up in the table. So I've refreshed that. Let's come to the database, and we are coming inside the test data that we have created and coming inside the tables. Just give me a second, guys. I'm getting one. Sorry. So in the test data, right, when I created a table, ideally it should be within this test data. But you see, it is not giving me the tables. It is showing me system table and file tables, right? So what is the problem here? The problem is the database. So if you see, it is selected as master, right? However, we need to change this to the test data, because test data is the one that has been created by us, right? So I will be creating my table within the test data, but that's not happening here. Now this scenario will be coming up very often. So when you're writing a query, right, your queries will be involving multiple databases, and your queries will be having some particular database, and there will be a situation where you're working on something else in a different database, right? So how do you make that switch, that whenever your query is getting executed, it will come to your database and then execute that? So for this, there are 2 ways. Actually, you can manually come ahead and come here and change this. So I can come here, master, and select this test data. So now when this test data is selected, and if I execute this, my code will work properly within this database. Otherwise, now this is like more of a manual process. If you forget to change, what then? You have to redo it, right? So the best way, right, to use a keyword called use this keyword, and after that, right, what you need to do, you need to give the name of the database. So I will say use test data, and then you can write go, right? So if you are using this 2 lines, right, use the database and then click on go, and then if you execute all of those things, so wherever the database is there, right, but while it is executing, it will change that to the test data. So if I execute this, you see it has changed over the test data, right? So in this scenario, what we are doing, we have made the query independent. So now we are not manually going ahead and changing this, right? So we have got this and it is executed. So it has already created. Now the second time again, if I go ahead and create this one names, it will start throwing up an error. Okay. So we have created a table. Now next, we need to insert some data within this, right? So we'll say insert insert data in table. So how do we insert the data? Now there are 2 things that you can find, right? Like one, if you need to insert small data, and other, like you have to insert like bulk data within this. How do you do that? So I will say there is a keyword called insert into. So you have to use insert into keyword, and then you have to give the name of the table where you want to insert. So I will say insert into names, and then I will say values, and you need to specify the values that you want to insert over here. So first name, I will just write Amit, then I will say Mishra, and then there is something address. So I will just put something West Road. Okay, and I will execute this. I will select this and execute this. So when I'm using this, right, you see it is giving me that one row has been affected. So insert into names, values, one row has been affected. Now with this, right, you can only insert one rows at a time. You can only insert one rows at a time. Let's say if I have to insert one more thing, I can use this way and I can run it together. So in total, it would have created 3 rows. So let's go ahead and check the data that is currently there in our table. So how do you check the data? So basically, checking the data means selecting the data in SQL statement. So select statement is the most universal one, right? So if you are writing any query within the SQL, it won't be complete without starting with the SQL, without the select statement. So I'll say select star and from test data, not test data, it is names. And what this star is doing, I'll come to this later, but yeah, let me execute this. So you see here, I am now getting the F name, L name, address, Amit Mishra, and 1, 2, 3. So this is the value that we have inserted. Now, we were trying to insert all the values. Let's say if you have to insert values in only one of the column. We have created 3 columns, right? F name and last name and address. If you have to insert in only one of the column, what should be the query? So what I will do, I will just copy this up over here and I will say insert data in only selected columns. It's not like multiple columns. I'll just say select into selected columns. So here, right, after the table name, you need to mention the column names where you have to insert. So let's say if I want to just insert the first name and the address, I will just mention over there that, okay, I need to insert the data into only F name and address. And I will just change this Amit to Sumit, remove this one. And here I will say 555, something like this, and I will execute it over here. And then when I come here and select the data from the names, you see, I am only able to execute this. So Sumit, null, and then 555 West row that is coming up. So when you have like multiple columns, and if you want to select only one particular, or you want to insert data only into a selected column, specify the names over there. Okay, so now we have put in the data, right? But take an example of your regular work. Maybe you're working into SQL, right? And your work requires you to clean the data from the table in every week, right? You want to clean the data that is there and update that with existing data, right? So what you can do in that case, so you can use a keyword called truncate table. Truncate table. Now this truncate can be different in different database that we are using. Maybe in MySQL it will be different, in Oracle it will be different, but here we'll be using the truncate table. Now in using the truncate table, and then we will give the names, truncate table names, right? So we will just go ahead and execute this. And now when I select all of this, so you see, I am just having F name, L name, address with no data available within this. So what this truncate table has done, it has cleaned the data. So I will just put a comment out here, clean the table, or I can say delete the contents of the table. Delete the contents of the table out here, and then truncate table over here. Now this is like small data set, right? But for the training, what we'll do, we'll use a little bigger data set so that we have more information, so that we can query from there. We can write some queries statement. We can generate some queries from there. So for that, right, we will be using a transactional data, which is basically a superstore data. You might have seen it somewhere. So this data is basically a sales information from a superstore. And we have like order date, ship date, price, selling price, quantity, and all those kind of information. And there is like 3 sheets that we are having: orders, return, and users. We will import this data into our SQL Server database, right? And then on top of that, we will start writing our queries. So I will share this data also with you so that you can like import your data and work on that. Now, how do I import this data? So let me refresh this, go to the database, come to the test database. right? So this is the tables that we have created, dbo.names, right? Now, if I have to import some data, what you need to do, you need to do a right click on this, right click on your database, and then click on the task. In this task section at the bottom, there is something called import data. So click on this import data. Now, when you click on this import data, we click on next. It'll just take a while to open up this data source. Okay, so here, right, if you see at the top, it says SQL Server import and export wizard. So this tool comes directly while you are downloading the SQL Server. So here you can insert this. You can select the data source over here, which is your Excel file, right? So you can select it from here, then click on next and go ahead and import the data. But if I use this one over here, right, I will get an error. Now, not only I will get the error, if you try to do that, you will also get the error. And for some reason, right, they keep on throwing the error, even though like you come into the latest version. And what is that error that will come up? The error will come something like this: ACEOLEDB 12.0 not registered on your local machine. So this is the error that you will get. Now, how do you fix this error, right? Just search for this error, and or like I will just send an email with this link. So what you do, you will be getting an downloadable file, access database engine.exe. Just download this file and run it over here. That's it. Once you do that, after that, right, close your SQL Server and reopen it, and your error will be fixed. To do in my system, I have something separate, import and export wizard 64-bit. Now, basically that error that I showed you, it comes up because of some version mismatch. So that's the reason it will give you that error. So I have a separate version, so I will be doing it from there. But both of it gives you the same result. So we have this import and export wizard, then click on next. Let's click on data source. This section will take a while. Okay. So here, right, like if you see at the top, it says import and export wizard. So import and export wizard, right, using this, it's not that you can only import your Excel. If you have some data that you want to import from any other database, you can also do that. So at the top, you see there is this Oracle Teradata. So you need to understand how to connect to that, and then you can use those options to import the data from the other databases that we have. I will select the Microsoft Excel. So I've selected, and then it will ask me to select the location where my file is stored. So I will go ahead, click on browse, and I will just select the Superstore 2019. Make sure you're not changing the Excel version that is coming up, right? So in some of the system, it might even say like from 2007 to 2010. So make sure you're not changing that. I don't know, but for some reasons, right, like Microsoft SQL Server and SSIS, this sometimes throw error if you are trying to select the recent version of Microsoft Excel, and it will ask you to download further add-ins to solve that. So make sure you're not changing that. Try to keep it as early as possible, like 2007 or before that kind of thing. So I'll just leave it 2007, click on next. Now it is asking me to give a destination where I want to load the file, right? So I have the SQL Server native client 11. So if you are just trying to bring the data into your own system, you can use again SQL Server native client. Otherwise, you can select, let's say if you're trying to move from SQL to other server, right? Teradata or Oracle, you can select the option from there. Then after this, we have the server name. So server name is important because there can be a situation you are working with multiple servers onto your system, right? So you need to select the appropriate one. I will select the local server that I have. And then another important thing is the database. Where do you want to keep the data? So we have brought in the data. Now, where do I keep this data? So I will keep the data into the test data that I have created. So we have created this test database, right? I will select that from there and then click on next. So it says copy data from one or more tables and write a query to specify the data to transfer. So if you don't want to write a new query, right, to bring in the data, just go ahead with the first option. Now, if you want to write a SQL query and then bring the data and get into those complications, then you can leave that. But in my opinion, you can just use the first option, copy data from one or more tables, and then click on the next option. Now here, right, it will tell you the sheets that is available into your Excel. Now, generally, right, these sheets are equal to a table that you are having into any database. In Excel, we call it sheets. In other terms, if you look into that, right, Excel is also a database. However, it is not as advanced as these databases are there, like SQL Server or Oracle or MySQL. But yeah, Excel in itself, it's a small database. So it is showing you all the sheets. You need to select which sheet you need the data from, right? So I will select orders, returns, and users. I need all the three data, right? Now, when I select all of them, like this check mark is to select which data you want to bring in. And then if you click on individual ones, let's say I have clicked on individual order. At the bottom, you will see there are two options, edit, mapping, and preview. So if you preview that, right, it will show you the data that is available, and it will be showing just top 15-20 rows from the data to show how the data is looking like, what you are importing. And then this import data is something which is important. So what you do in this edit mapping, let me open that up. Okay. So now it has opened up, right? So you see, these are the different source table and these are the destination table, right? Now, you don't need to do anything with this. Make sure this one is important, right? Like what is this, this over here? So it says the data type of that particular column. So when you are importing the data, maybe in your Excel, it is stored in a text form, right? But when you are bringing it into a database, you want to convert that into a float. Now I will give you a list or a note with all the different kind of database that we have, different kinds of data types that we have available. But the difference between the float and a normal number, so float is a decimal and integer is like a whole number, like that. So we'll select the year, and this is the float out here. This is envar character. Whatever you want to change, you can select that from there and then click on OK. One more thing, you see, it is like the nullable option is checked. So what is the meaning of this nullable? Nullable means we can keep these columns as null. So let's say if we are adding some existing data onto these columns, right? We can select this, like you can keep this as checked. You can always go ahead and change all these settings and everything at the later point, but make sure, I mean, if you're doing this in the beginning itself, then it's much better. Let's click on OK, click on next. And then here we don't have to do anything, just click on next and then finish. So let's wait for this process to be completed and get all the data into our database. Okay. So it has completed all the steps and it is showing me 1952 rows has been transferred and all those things has been done. Let's close this. And now I will just come to this database, right? And if I open this table up, you see, you are getting the names out here, right? Names, orders, return, and users. So names was the table that we already created. And then orders, returns, and users are the three things that we have imported into our file, right? So first thing, what I will do, I will do a right click and rename this. So there is a dollar sign at the end of each one of them. I don't want that dollar sign. So I will just right click and rename this. I will remove the dollar from each one of them. So you can right click on the name and then just rename this. You can also press F2 to rename this. Okay. Now, if you see all of these objects, is having a DBO in the beginning, right? Now, what is the full form of this DBO? The full form for this DBO is database object. Now, all of these things that you are creating, right, is an object in the database, and DBO stands for who is the owner currently, right? So DBO means the database is the owner for these different tables that you are creating. Primarily, you are the owner, but in other technical terms, your database is the owner of these tables that you are creating. So that's why the DBO is there. Okay, so we have brought in the data. Now we will start writing the query. So we have your data, we have your data into the system, and then the first thing, obviously, what you do is to see the entire data that is available, right? Now, how do I see this? We write select star from, and then you need to write the name of the table. So we'll say orders. Select star from orders. Now, this statement, right, if you see, is the most common statement that you will be writing down the time, because this will give you the entire data. So if you're writing 10 queries, within that 10 queries, 2 times you will again use this one. I'll just execute this. And this is the data that we have, which we are importing, which are imported actually, and we are seeing this over here. So what is this individual things mean, right? So select word actually is used to show the data. So if you are showing this data, right, this data is getting shown to you onto the screen, right? So for that, we are using the select statement. Star means all the rows and columns. Star word means all the rows and columns. And then we have from orders. So from is the from, and then the table name, basically from which table you want to get in the data, because we have multiple tables, right? Orders, returns, and user. So which table you want to bring in the data from, that's why order. Now in general, right, whenever you write a query, there will be 3 things inside the query. One, a select state, then we have a from, and then we have a where clause. So depending on this 3 clause, right, all your queries will be written. So in the select query or in the select statement, what we do, we write whatever columns we need from the data. So columns, as in here we have mentioned, we need all the columns, all the rows and all the columns. Instead, if I need, let's say, only this maybe customer name, right? If I need only customer name, I can mention customer name. And I will put this under square bracket. I have put this under square bracket because I have not mentioned the name of the table over here, right? So I will say tables, orders. So I will say select customer name from orders, and then here you need to specify a filter. So where clause is used to specify a filter. So I can say where discount is equal to 0. So I will say select customer name from orders where discount is equal to 0, and I will just execute this, right? So it is giving me all the person name, right? Like where the discount was coming as 0. So in all the queries that you will be writing down the line, right, you will have 3 elements: one, the select one, then the from, then the where statement within this. Okay. I will just mention it over here, structure of a SQL query. This one is show all records. This is used for show all records. Okay, let's go back and see the entire data. So when we have all this data, now the next thing what we can see here is like how many rows of data that we have in this, right? How many rows of data is available within this? So I can say count the rows in the data, and you might need to check that information. It's not you are counting the rows sometime, right? Like you have to count, let's say maybe how many customers we have, or how many rows are there where a certain condition is meeting, right? So to find all those things, you can use this particular function. So we'll say select and then count, and within this count we will be using this star from orders. So what does the statement mean? So I'm saying count of everything. So all the rows and columns is there, right? So generally the star means all the rows and column. But when we are saying this count, right? What we are saying, count the rows, how many rows are available from the orders, and we will just execute this. So we are getting 1952. So the data is 1952. If we use the same condition over here where discount is 0, right? So it will give you the result in the count form where the discount is 0, 166. There are 166 records where the discount is equal to 0. Now here you see at the top, it is saying no column name, right? Now it is showing no column name. That means there is no column name assigned to it. So how do you assign a column name? There is two ways to this. So either you can mention the as keyword. So where the column name is not coming for this calculation, right? So select count star as, and I can say total underscore count. We can use this. If I execute it over here, the no column name will be changed to total count. I can also remove this or like use this without the as keyword. If I just use this up over here, still it will show me the total count. You see, in previous versions of the SQL query writing, we have to use the as keyword. Now we can do it without even writing the as keyword over there. Okay. Now we have a question that, okay, we have like a lot of customer names available, right? I want to find a list of unique customer, right? How many unique customers do we have within the data? So the statement for this, I will say, find the unique records from the data. Now we'll say select, and then what we need to do, we'll just mention the orders first. And then I will say customer name. Okay, so we are writing select customer name. Now to find the unique values, right? What is the keyword we will use? We'll use the distinct keyword. So select distinct of customer name from the orders table. And let's go ahead and execute this. Right. So when I'm saying this, right, what we are getting the unique list, unique customer list. But sometimes, right, you might have a confusion that, okay, we can also do it like this. Let's say we have a field called region. So I'll say region, and then we will use the distinct. Can we do it like this? No. Distinct, the column where we will be using the distinct should always be in the beginning, right? So we will say distinct of customer name. And then if we want to include multiple columns, right? So customer name is one column. If we have to include more than one column, we will say the region or the name of the different column that you want, and then execute it over here. So now it will say customer name, and then beside that, we will be having the region. So if we have to use a distinct thing, right? Always use the distinct in the beginning. Okay, now we have been using a table. Now a very classic example that you will have, you need to duplicate the record sometime or create a duplicate table. So how do you do that? So I will say create a duplicate table. This is a very classic thing that you will get, that you are already working in a particular table and you want to create a similar table. Now, where can be the situation, right? You have a table created for January, right? And you want to create the table again for February. And you want to do something over there and you have to create a duplicate table. How do you do that? Do you again go ahead and import the data? Yes, you can do that. The other way, what you can do, you can say select star, and then you will say into. Into, using this into keyword, we can create a new table, right? So the new table will be, let's say I will give the name new table, like this. So what I'm trying to do here, I will say select star. Star means all the data into new table, into something table called new table from the orders. And if I go ahead and execute this, right, you see it is giving me an like answer 1952 rows affected. And what is the result we would have got? We would have got a new table with the name new table. Let me just refresh this up. come to this table. You see here, I'm getting a new table as a result, right? So we have created a duplicate table, and within this, if I just say select star from new table, you see, this is the same data that we are having, and we are getting it from the new table, right? So the requirement was you need to create a duplicate table, and if the requirement was that you need to like clean the data from there, you can use the truncate table command from there. So truncate table, and then we can say the name of the table, which is new underscore table. So it will clean the data, right? So now if I execute this, we will have a blank table in which we can import the data, or we can manually enter some data, right? That is needed. Cool. So this is the use of duplicate table. You can use the select star into keyword and then create a new table with this. Okay, let's look the base data again, which is our orders table. Select star from orders. So till now we have done the count, we have done the distinct, right? Now let's look into the where clause. So I need to find, right, all the customers where the sales value is greater than 5,000. I need to find out sales value is greater than 5,000, right? So I will write the statement over here. Find all the customers where sales value greater than 5,000. So what we need to do over here, we'll say select customer name, right? Customer name from orders where my sales is greater than 5,000. If I execute this, I will get the record over here, right? Now, if you see here, right, like I am not putting in the proper names. So in the original table, in the original orders table, we have sales field in the S is in the caps, right? Here F I'm writing in the smaller case, S I'm writing in the uppercase. So in SQL, query writing is case insensitive. It doesn't matter what you're writing, if it is in caps or like a smaller case, it doesn't matter. If the spelling is correct, it will accept and it will show you the value. Okay, so select customer name from orders. Now always make this in sequence, right? So select customer name where the sales is greater than 5,000. Now if I have to add another condition, right, within this, I also want only the state should be California. So currently we are getting the data from all the different table, all the different region that we have. Let me show you. Select star from orders. If I just execute this, so we have a state column over here in the data. So, and we are getting the data from all the different state, but I want this to be restricted to only California. So I'll say where sales is greater than 5,000, and I will say and state or province, and this I will wrap up under the square bracket, sales state or province is equal to California. Okay, and now let's execute this. So we are getting the name. Now it will be great if I can also see the name of the state right in front of it. So I'll just put a comma and update it up over here, so I can understand if those are correct. So you see, it is all California out here, right? And what is the count? 15. There are only 15 people where the state or province is California and the sales is greater than 5,000, right? This is still simple. Now let's say if someone is asking you, can you show me all the data where these two conditions are there, but I also want in the state, right? They can be from anywhere. Maybe they are from California, they are from Alabama or Texas. They can be from anywhere. So I will say Texas and let's say Florida or New York. So I have now like a certain condition where I'm saying sales is greater than 5,000, and this one, right, state or province can be within anything, California, New York, and Texas. So how do I do that? If you have to write it sequentially you have to mention it like this, or this one is equal to New York, and then again in or here you have to mention it's Texas. But this, like if you have a lot of conditions, it will be very difficult to write in this form, right? So the better approach to write this function is what we'll do. You will write an in function over there. So we'll say and state or province in, and I will just wrap them around the brackets, and within this I will give the name of the state. So California, Texas, and then I will say New York. And I will just go ahead and execute this. So now you see we are getting all the result that is from Texas, New York, California. Okay. Okay. So this is about like finding the customer value using the filter. So what we are doing here, we are applying the filter in the where statement. Now let's move to the next level. So we are again having the, let's look into the sales data again, the complete data again. So we have customer name, shipment mode, and all those things. And we have the sales figure also. Okay. So what I will do, I will just bring the sales figure also out here. Basically, I will just create a new, this one, sorting the data. So what we need to do, we need to sort the data out here, right? So I'll just copy this entire thing and update it up over here. So I will say select customer data, state or province, and then I will just put a sales field also along with this, and I will execute it. So what we are getting the sales data, but my sales data, right, it's not sorted in fashion. It is not sorted in nature. What we are getting is like haphazard. So to sort the data, we will use a keyword called order by. We'll use the keyword called order by, and in front of that order by, we can specify the particular column on which we want to sort it. So I'll say order by sales, and then after that, if you don't update anything ascending or descending, by default it will sort the data in ascending. So you see, if I have not mentioned anything, it is sorting the data in the ascending order. But if you want to sort the data in the descending order, you can just specify the DESC out there for descending, and you see the data is now getting sorted up in the descending order. So this is about the order by. Next, grouping the data. Now, what is grouping the data? And where do we use the group? So let's say we have different state over here, right? So I will say select, and then I will say state or province. You know, if you don't want to manually type it again and again, what you can do, you can just double click on the name which you have written earlier and copy from there. So select state or province, and then I will say sales from orders. Okay. Now, why grouping is important, first of all, right? Okay, to make a grouping, let me show you an example why grouping is important. So let's say you have two person like working over there, right? Two person is working, and this is logging hours. So how many hours you have logged in a particular day? So let's say this person A has come into office and he has logged in for 2 hours, right? Then again he logged for 2 hours, then 2 hours, then 1.5 hours, something like this. So this is 8.5. Okay, let me just make it 2.5 over here. It should not work too much. So yeah, this is 8. So this is person A, and then this is person B out here. And let me just copy the same thing for this also, right? Now, if I ask you a simple question, right? So how much person A is working and how much person B is working? What will be your answer? This is a very like basic question, right? Like how much hours do you think person A is working in this data?
We can apply group by, Amit.
Yes. So what is happening over here in the background, when you are trying to mentally calculate this, right? You are taking all these things into an account for this one person, right? So for this one person, all these values are getting aggregated. Same thing for person B, right? All these values are getting aggregated. So in the end, if I ask you to give you a summary of this data, you will say A is equal to 8 hours and B is equal to 8 hours. So wherever you get this situation where you have like a lot of duplicate rows, right? And you want to group all those data on the basis of some aggregation, you will be using the group by function. So let's come back over here. Now, if I use this group by directly by state or province, right? Let me execute. It will throw up an error saying that, okay, column order sales is invalid in the select list because it is not contained in either an aggregate function. So generally, right, whenever you are using a group by, it needs to be along with an aggregate function. Now, aggregate function, basically like sum, max, min, average, those kind of function you need to use. Then only that group by will be valid. So what I can do instead of sales, right? What I'm eventually doing, I want all the name of the state in the left hand side, and in front of each of the state, I want the total value of the sales for those state. So I will say sum of sales like this, and then execute it. Now, when I'm executing this, you see what I'm having? I'm having the state or province, Illinois. And then in this column, we are getting the total sales value for that particular state. It is not duplicate in nature at this point of time. And select state or province, what I can do, I can give the name here, total sales from order, and then I will just execute it, total sales. And at the end, we can just use the order by, and I'll say order by total sales. Send it. Okay. So we have grouped the data now, right? Now, let's say if I have to use a condition on this, right? Condition as in, let's say if you are saying that you are doing a sum of sales, right? And I want to also apply a condition of the sum of sales. So now I want to see that how many sales are greater than 5,000. Or let's say not 5,000, maybe let's put something as 30, 40,000, right? So if I say where sales is greater than 40,000. Okay. You see, this is happening where sales is greater than 40,000. But what I'm doing here, I'm using sum of sales, right? So generally, there is a rule that whenever you are using the group by function, right? Along with that group by function, there is a keyword called having. So we will say having sum of sales greater than 5,000 or 40,000 or whatever is the number. Sum of sales greater than 15,000. I can mention it like this. I'm just using it somewhere else.
I guess before order by.
Yeah. So you see, we are getting the result. So the general rule is whenever you are using the or you are using the group by statement. Along with that, use having and not the where, right? You can use all of them, but yeah, sequentially, when you are writing more and more queries, you will understand where this where statement is working and where that having is working on that. Okay, let's look into the base data that we have now. Let's open up the data again. Now, after this, let's do one thing which is like case statement. What is a case statement? So case statement is basically kind of a if function that you can write using the query, right? So there are two type of one is like case statement and one is a function, right? So there are two things. One is a query that you can write and one is a function that you write. So what we are trying to do here is, let's say we are trying to find out, we need this state or province. The question, let me write the question. So find the state or find the maximum sales, right? Maximum sales for each state and give a bucket if it is high or low value sales. So what we need to do, if the sales, we will be finding the max of the sales for each of the region, and then we need to assign it to a value, right? Like if it is more than 15,000, we will say high value sales. If it is less than 15,000, we'll say it is low value sales. So let's start off with writing this. So I will say select, and then I will say state or province, and then we'll say max of sales, max of sales, max underscore sales. So this is coming from the orders, and then we will be just using the group by of state or province. So till here you can easily write, right? We are easily writing this state or province max sales. Now we have to add one more column to this, right? Now like adding one more column, we want to get the sales bucket if it is high value sales or low value sales, depending on the condition, if these numbers are greater than 15,000 or not. So for that, we'll put a comma again and we'll start writing the case statement. Now when we write this case statement, there is two things. We start with case and end with an end keyword out here, and within this we write our condition, right? So within this case and end, we will write when, and I will copy this max of sales. When max of sales is greater than 15,000, then mark it as high sales, else low sales, right? And at the end, we can just go ahead and execute this. We are getting the column name, right? We don't have any column name at this point, but somehow we are getting some value as high sales and low sales over here. So there is no column name, right? So what we can do, we can put a column name also over here. We can say as, and we can say sales bucket, and I will just execute all of this, and we will get a column name as sales bucket, and within this we have the bucket. Now also we can order by this column, right? We can order by this column on the sales bucket to show high bucket, like high sales or low sales, whatever you want, but that is not useful at this point. That's why. So we'll just ignore that. Okay. Let me go back and let me open up the data again. Select start from orders. Okay. So we will have like certain other things that what I will do, I will continue it in the next session tomorrow. We'll start with a like statement, like operator, and there will be a few other query things that we will do. And then we will move on to the next set of important things that we have in SQL, right? So for tomorrow's session, what you can do, you can like be ready with that like download of the software. I will also send you the data over the email. And yeah, you can try to import the data. Also the recording, if you have any questions, you can drop me a note with the email on whatever questions you have, and I will be happy to answer all of them in the sessions tomorrow. We'll connect at the same time, and yeah, we'll have like a lot more questions coming in and a lot more content in the next session tomorrow. Thank you everyone for your time, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amit.
Thank you all.